Dr. Mehrunnisa Pathan, she is Associate Professor from Department of English, Maharashtra State, India. She has more than 17 years of teaching and research experience. She has published near about 27 research papers in national and international journals. She has participated in near about 87 national and international conferences. As a resource person, she has delivered lectures at refresher orientation short term courses and pre PhD coursework. So, once again, I welcome you, ma'am, and you can please proceed with your proceedings.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Let me begin my presentation with an ayat from the Holy Quran. Read in the name of thy Lord, who created all the human beings from one single soul, men and women. I am singularly honored and pleased to be invited by Cape Camoran Trust, Lavender Literary Club, India, with various other educational institutions in collaboration to deliver this keynote address for the 3-day International Virtual Conference on Gender Studies. A critical inquiry into the field of feminism and digital feminism has led to the progressive nature of this presentation. There are two major critical and crucial areas that actually formulated the major concerns of feminist discourses and digital feminist discourses. As the title of the presentation is Digital Feminist Discourses, a Critical Perspective. So let me share my screen. Yeah. So the screen is visible. Yes. Moving ahead, a critical inquiry into the field of feminism, as I mentioned, made me think seriously on two major areas. The first one is digital feminism, and second, are we really in the fourth wave of feminism? There have been lot of discussions and deliberations on the first and second and the third wave of feminism. The title of my research, as I mentioned, the presentation is from an article, inspiration from an article that was published by Blue Stockings magazine by Ragnar Johnson, who is a blog managing editor of the magazine entitled Is the Fourth Wave of Feminism Digital? Now, moving ahead, let me also mention about the project that we have undergone. So, Indian digital feminism, actually, this term was coined by me and two of my coordinators, as I was the project director. And this project was being sanctioned by ICSSR New Delhi, and it was a sponsored research study. So, digital feminism, a study in Sanskrit, English, and Urdu literature. We know that there have been three waves of feminism that have been formulated in the English, as far as English is concerned, but in Sanskrit and Urdu, feminist discourses have never been formulated. So this was an attempt to do that through this particular course. Let me also mention, when we talked about the Urdu literature, so we also took the example, like when we talk about the word like feministe, a French word which means a woman. So in Arabic, we have a word like al-nisa. You know, nisa means a woman. So we have tried to also incorporate the complete surah, which is called as Surah Al-Nisa. And we have tried to look at the various rights and the other liberties that are being granted to the Muslim women as such. Moving ahead, like I have began it by the definitions, the presentation. Like when we talk about a female, so who is a female? Someone who is a female is a woman or a girl. Feminine qualities and things relate to or are considered typical of women in contrast to men. So feminism is the belief and aim that women should have the same rights and opportunities as men. Feminist is a person who believes in and supports feminism. Now, when we talk about a woman, so woman is defined as a woman is an adult female human being. Womanhood is the state of being woman rather than a girl or the period of a woman's adult life. A womanizer, a man who likes to have many short sexual relationships with women. Womanly people describe a woman's behavior, character, or appearance as womanly when they like it because they think it is typical of or suitable for a woman rather than a man or a girl. Now, definitions of feminism. It is the advocacy of women's rights on the ground of equality of sexes. Feminism is a collection of movements and ideologies aimed at defining, establishing, and defending equal political, economic, and social rights for women. The belief that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities. Feminist is defined as a person who advocates equal rights for women. Now, Islamic feminism. Feminism and its derivative Islamic feminism struggle in order to build a better society for both men and women, where individual freedom is recognized and guaranteed under a non-discriminatory legal system. It is believed that Islam was founded to eradicate any discrimination, creating an ideal community in which the underpinning ideology is justice and equality. Such was community envisioned by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Islamic feminism can be viewed as a rebirth of the vision. But there are few things that I would mention, like when we talk about Islamic feminism, and we is basically when we are referring to the Muslim women, we do forget about the other issues, and only most of the time the veil and the scarf becomes the main subject of discussion. Now, moving ahead, the first wave of feminism, it began from late 19th and early 20th century, and the second wave of feminism began in the 1960s and it continued till 1990s, and sexuality and reproductive rights were dominant issues. So the third wave of feminism, I mentioned Julia Kristeva. So the other is neither an evil being, foreign to me, nor a scapegoat from the outside that is of another sex, class, race, or nation. She says, I am at once the attacker and the victim at the same time. So the third generation is less about the gains that could be made for women and more about the gains that can be made for human beings. Now, from feminism to post-feminism, if we go through this, we will find that there are various names that I have tried to mention, and especially the books and the essays that they have written. So feminist theories emerge from various feminist movements, which aims to understand the nature of gender inequality by examining women's social role and lived experiences. It has developed theories in a variety of disciplines in order to respond to the issues such as the social construction of sex and gender. Feminist activists campaigned for women's rights, such as contract law, property, voting rights, autonomy, reproductive rights, and so on. They also focused on gender neutrality, equal pay for the women, reproductive rights for women, including access to contraceptives and abortion, the rights to enter into contract and own property, protect women and girls from domestic violence, sexual harassment, and sexual assault. They also advocated for workplace rights, including maternity leave and equal pay for women. And we know that these domestic violence have increased in the during this COVID-19 period. Moving ahead with Martha Rempton, professor of history and director of the Center for Gender Equity at Pacific University, in her article on the three waves of feminism, published in the magazine of Pacific University in 2008, states that, I quote, some thinkers have thought to locate the roots of feminism in ancient Greece with Sappho, or the medieval world with the Hildegard of Bingen, or Kristen de Pizan. Certainly, Olympides de Gaulle, Mary Wollstonecraft, 1797, and Jane Austen, 1817. They are considered to be the foremothers of the modern women's movement. All of these people advocated for the dignity, intelligence, and basic human potential of the female sex. However, it was not until the late 19th century that the efforts for women's equal rights coalesced into a clearly identifiable and self-conscious movement, or rather a series of movements. So we have the first wave feminism took place in the late 19th and early 20th century, as I mentioned, emerging out of demands on environment of urban industrialism and liberal socialist politics. It was also believed that women were morally superior to men, and so their presence in the civic sphere would improve public behavior and the political process. It was basically related to an examination of the differences between men and women. So the second wave of feminism, as I mentioned, began in the 1960s and continued into the 1990s. In this phase, sexuality and reproductive rights were dominant issue, as I have already mentioned them. So Julia Kristeva argues when the first generation minimized the difference, the second generation of European feminists began to focus on it intently, often simply by revaluing what the old system devalued. All that is womanly, unquote. For the second generation of feminism, Kristeva criticizes in the following words, I quote, it was not and still is not willing to accommodate the existing system, unquote. Composed of women influenced by psychoanalytic thought and the arts, the second generation, again I quote, is characterized by a quasi-universal rejection of linear temporality and by a highly pronounced mistrust of political life, unquote. So for the third generation, Kristeva says, I quote, the other is neither an evil being, foreign to me, nor a scapegoat from the outside, that is of another sex, class, race, or nation. She further states that I am at once attacker and the victim at the same time, as I have already mentioned Julia Kristeva's statement. In the end, Kristeva's discussion of the third generation of feminism is less about the gains that could be made for women and more about the gains that could be made for the human beings. So moving ahead, post-feminism, moving from feminism to post-feminism. So post-feminism is a reaction against some perceived contradictions and some absences of second wave feminism. So the third wave feminism intends to broaden the feminist struggles. The term was used in the 1980s to describe a backlash against second wave feminism. Other post-feminists say, I quote, feminism is no longer relevant to today's society, unquote. So Tanya Modleski, in her book on feminism without woman, culture and criticism in a post-feminist age, it is published in 1991, states that feminism is no longer relevant to today's society. In 1919, a journal was launched by which, I quote, female literary radicals stated that, again, quote unquote, we are interested in people now, not in men and women, unquote. So the moral, social, economic, and political standard should not have anything to do with sex, that it would be pro-woman without being anti-men, and that their stance is called post-feminist. So Amelia Jones in Post-Feminism, Feminist Pleasures and Embodied Theories of Art says that post-feminist texts, which emerged in the 1980s and 1990s, portrayed a second wave feminism as a monolithic entity and were overgeneralizing in their criticism. It was in the early part of 1980s when teenage women and women in their 20s were labeled by the media as the quote unquote post-feminist generation. Today in the global era, the term post-feminist is still used to refer to young women who are thought to benefit from the women's movement through expanded access to employment and education and new family arrangements, but at the same time to do not push for further political change. Pamela Aronson, in her book on feminist or post-feminist, young women's attitudes towards feminism and gender relations, asserts, I quote, post-feminism is a highly debated topic since it implies that feminism is dead and because the equality it assumes is largely a myth, unquote. Most of the feminist and post-feminist writings have problematized issues related to women's identity, cultural, social, political, economic, and so on and so forth. And that is the main focus of our attention. We have an example of Phyllis Chesler. Now, Phyllis Chesler has written a book called The Death of Feminism. What's next in the struggle for women's freedom? She is an American writer, psychotherapist, and a professor emerita of psychology and women's studies at the College of Staten Island. She is known as a feminist psychologist and is the author of 16 books, including the bestseller Women and Madness in 1972. I have been inspired by the very title of the text and seriously thought about it as to what is next. Second inspiration was from Rachel Bowlby, where she begins her book Feminist Destination and further essays on Virginia Woolf by wondering about the possible ends or destinations implied in speaking a feminist writing and criticism. Where is feminism or feminist theory going, and what would constitute its arrival? The end of the movement? Bowlby raised these issues. So a critical inquiry, as I mentioned, in the field of feminism made me to seriously think upon the two major issues, arrival and the end of the movement. And second, are we really into the digital feminism or fourth wave of feminism? And what are the various digital discourses that are being formulated? So we would be trying to answer this question, and I hope by the end of my presentation, we will be able to get an answer to the question that has been raised. Moving ahead, various models of feminism. We have liberal feminism. Men and women are equally rational. They are both therefore qualified to fulfill social and practical roles at any level. The following were the prominent writers. I have already mentioned Mary Wollstonecraft, Maria Stewart, the Grimke sister, Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinman, Molly Yard. Moving ahead with socialist Marxist feminism, they represent demarcation between private and public sphere of activity maintained by capitalists for their own interest, and the writers are Marx, Engels, Gilman, Gullentine, and Ilstein. Radical feminism, here man is the source of all oppression, all culture is male dominated. Patriarchal separate women's culture with separate set of values which are different for that of men. So writers of the period are Mary Daly, Andrea Dworkin, Kate Millett, Juliet Michel. Psychoanalytical feminism, women use different language for themselves based on their bodies. It should be different from language of men. Women's developmental process is a different that of a man. Existential feminism, women have to assert her autonomy in defining herself against any man. She has to define her own identity, dealing herself apart and creating solidarity for other women. And the best example is Simone de Beauvoir, where she speaks about women are not born, but they are being made, a social construct with the text like the second sex. Individual feminism, it speaks about frustrations of middle class women. It emphasizes on liberating sexuality of women, and Jinme Ware is one of the examples. Cultural feminism, there is a dichotomy between mind and body, which is substantiated by mental capacities of women. That standpoint epistemology. Postmodern feminism, body is a site at which important identity forming yet contradictory experiences occur. Alice J. Dine, basically Genesis configurations of women and modernity. Relative or rational feminism, women's rights of in terms of childbearing or nurturing capacities when compared to men. So we do have these models of feminism, and moving ahead with the first three waves of feminism, a bit I would be talking about that, and finally I will be moving on to the digital feminist discourses. So the emergence of first wave feminist, it was with the suffrage that came out of necessity of second sex. They wanted to gain property and voting rights, and they wanted to claim for themselves autonomy and liberty. They also tended to be the most daring women in the spaces that usually prized female submission and disparaged vocal disobedience. So many of them, they were the poets, thinkers, politicians, activists, and educators, while others were in more precarious positions who were forced to necessarily fight for their rights in order to simply live their lives. They did not indeed identify of the first wave or even as feminist, but because of their valiant efforts to dismantle the literal patriarchy of the time, equity between the sexes slowly but surely began to transpire. So the first wave of feminist erases pre-existing feminism, like we have the native women's struggles with racism and sexism after colonial contact, or black women's involvement with ending slavery and segregation, but the wave conception of feminism poses an incremental amidst built up in feminism. So we do have the suffrage movement. They fought for their rights and autonomy. That was for the first class citizenship status throughout the world. So feminists have been at forefront of the fight for all women's and all people's struggles with, and indeed because of their identities and bodies. So aiming to end discrimination, oppression, and all forms of injustice, these groups and individuals altogether have reformed to extend many of the commonplace forms of inequity and violence. So before the introduction and popularization of digital media platforms. So moving ahead, second wave of feminism. The second wave was the extension of the first collectivized movement to action. And I have already mentioned the periods or the years from where we consider the second wave of feminism. And I have skipped the phases that are being given by Ellen Shaw Walter. I'm only looking at the waves of feminism. So which was showed up by the institutionalization of feminism within academia to counteract the rampant sexism and discrimination its academics faced. So it was further augmented by the innumerable activists who latched on to feminism as a political form of action and theoretical venue for critique. It led to an increased awareness of and criticism against a number of women's issues. So the third wave for feminism, as I mentioned, Julia Kristeva, she says men and women are like the two sides of the same coin. So the third wave particularly has been critical of far from all of them. It explored the unequal and inequitable, both unequal as well as the inequitable distribution of labor on the basis of sex and gender. That is more important. The pitfalls of American consumerism, the middle class ideals for middle class women, and the unethical treatment of sex workers. So it initiated an entire conversation on feminism and women's issues, albeit imperfectly and often paternalistically. So on the screen, you can see how the women, and basically this could be considered the resistance movement for that matter, for equality and for equal rights, and basically the voting rights and the property rights that they were demanding for. So moving ahead, I will be not going into much details because I need to focus more upon the digital feminist discourses. So as I mentioned, the the women in academia and other given political potency, notably Gloria Steinem, were overall more privileged than other unspoken, unheard support allies. These women were, for the most part, white, middle to upper class, able bodied, able minded, well educated, literate, heterosexual and cisgender identifying, English speakers, religiously and politically able to assimilate, documented and neutralized for their country of origin, and so on and so forth. And they were able to uh, problematize, or they were able to speak for themselves. But on the other hand, there were marginalized women. Instead of providing them with a platform to represent, they were being unspoken, unheard. Worse still were other feminists who were unconsciously and other times actively, even hostilely prosecuted certain groups, particularly trans people, sex workers, and people of color. Now, people of color, even today, we see what are their conditions, how the people of color are suffering in the US with the two incident and the resistance movements that have took place recently. Moving ahead with the third wave arouse, in part to criticize these tendencies in feminism and serve more importantly to discuss previously marginalized concerns. So we have already gone into the details of the third wave of feminism. Now, moving ahead with the online feminism. The feminist movement reportedly declared dead by mainstream media is actually very much alive, and it is online. And it was due to this we were able to formulate digital feminist discourses, even in Sanskrit and English and Urdu literature that I have already mentioned. So this is how the online feminism, or the future of online feminism, is. And now, in the during this COVID-19, everything is online. The global village is completely shut down. What we are into is also into an online virtual 3-day international conference on gender studies. So moving further with digital feminism, and now is the age of digital feminism, where it was believed that feminism has been outdone. But at the same time, in the visual world, feminism do exist. Feminism is now alive as online movement to fight against any kind of injustice against women. And you will be surprised to know that online, many of the women, many of the girl child, they have launched their complaints regarding the domestic violence that they have faced during this lockdown period, or during this COVID-19 period, the pandemic that we are into. So the online feminism has crossed all boundaries of nations, cultures, societies, and so on. Not only this, but they have, I can cite one example. At our railway station, there was a problem, and the lady, she simply has written, or she tweeted it to the minister, and immediately an action was being taken. So a woman may be in a vale, sitting at home or office, contributing to the online feminism. Whether a woman is at home or she is at a Goa beach or any other place, it hardly matters, but you do contribute to the online feminism. So now, how do we locate the existence of feminism? That is the fourth wave of feminism. I'm talking about that. So the fourth wave of feminism, yet few, if any, have written publicly about what exactly marks such a historical, spatial, philosophical, ecological, social, or economical juncture in feminist politics and practices. The fourth wave of feminism blog, for instance, recounts Hillary Clinton's attempt at presidency in its inaugural post. Yet it does little to readdress the needling question of what exactly is fourth wave of feminism. As Jessica Valente, founder of feministing.com, however, noted in a 2009 interview entitled Fourth Wave of Feminism with the New York Times, maybe the fourth wave is online. The question remains whether a determinable paradigm shift indeed has taken place due to the rise of digital media and online platforms, or more importantly, on what the repercussions of this contemporary state of feminism entails for those involved in its practice. Indeed, while the necessity of feminism has recently been once more envisioned, evidenced by aims to restrict abortion access, prevent violence against women, secure the rights of all women regardless of their backgrounds, ensure the most fundamental right to life for sex workers and trans women, among a myriad of equally compelling and pressing matters that have troubled activists and others alike. The need to redefine and streamline feminism as an icon of equality and paragon of activism becomes more silent in efforts to render mainstream that previously secluded spaces of feminism. So this is what is being talked about, the fourth wave of feminism, and to conjuncture the existence of different currents or waves of feminism. At least as a movement, there would need to be a certain kind of fundamental paradigm shift in the ideology and the operations of feminism. So we need to locate the fourth wave of feminism. If such a change of current could be said to have caused a paradigm shift within the majority of feminist activism and criticism, in fact, intimately intervened with its digital platform. So I would not be going much into the details. Like we have vast variety of schools of thought within online feminist communities. They could be coming up new faces of feminism, oftentimes each of them individually coming to terms with their own definitions or ideal practices of their own individuated yet multiple feminisms. So we do have some women blame others for crimes committed against them, some decree lesbianism, others see still trans women as men, many shame women in some way and perpetuate girl on girl hate, and so on and so forth. So various issues that have been there. So this is how the digital media we do have. I would be taking up various examples how digital feminist discourses are being formulated, and I would be talking about these 23 digital feminist discourses that have completely changed the outlook of the online feminism. So moving ahead, this I wanted to mention as a Black Girl Dangerous, Color Lines, and the Trans Advocate. These and a myriad of other sites are paving the way for increased visibility of the experiences and identities that we otherwise hear least about, and thus have little agency in therefore advocating for them. So Black Girl Dangerous, this is one. With the introduction of mass manufacturing and distribution, normalization, extensive and ongoing development and institutionalization of usage of digital media technologies, digital feminism has now a near infinite possible amount of operating channels for information. And we talk about various issues that are being sidelined in the name of greater good of feminism, such as classism, racism, LGBTQ discrimination, and mental and corporeal ableism. They are being now featured. So I would not be going into those details, but this is how what feminist looks like. So anyone, anywhere in the world, regardless of the boundaries, regardless of the culture, regardless of the nations, they can contribute to the online feminism as a struggle. So the key problem that this fourth wave will face will be the disproportionate access to and the ownership of digital media devices. Like in a time when now we are into even COVID-19 period, the pandemic, okay, and we know that the highest number of the COVID cases we have found in America, the most worst situations and the unpreparedness of the Americans, where the Statue of Liberty has been entangled into the chains. In a time when 80% of Americans are currently living in poverty in the US, class and income differences impact all communities to some degree, especially women and disadvantaged minorities. It will disadvantage, in particular, low-income earners, disabled people, people who speak non-dominant languages, non-coders, and people who live beyond the poverty lines. So moving ahead, I would be taking up these digital feminist discourses that have come up in form of 23 different digital feminist, you can say, the discourses. So First one is Lululemon's chairman has to step down after blaming his product's failure on fat women. Oh, no, he didn't. That's what thousands of women angrily uttered after co founder and chairman of Lululemon, Chip Wilson, went on national television to blame his company's sheer fabric pant problems on fat women. Frankly, some women's bodies just don't actually work for it, he said on Bloomberg television, while his wife Sanoon tried to interject. They don't work. For some women's bodies, it's really about the rubbing through the thighs, how much pressure is there over a period of time and how much they use it. After an outrage, customers hijacked the company's Facebook page and tweeted their disgust about his comments, and he has to step down. So the second example, we have SNL finally hired an African American woman. So online outrage mounted last fall. SNL decided to hold a secret audition to hire a black female comedian earlier this year. So the show ended up hiring Shashir Zamata. This year means last year, because this presentation we had made it for this was a complete research that we have went into when we were into the digital feminism project. So the show ended by hiring Shashir Zamata, their first female of color since Maya Randolph left in 2007. So the show also announced it had hired two black female writers earlier last week. Color of Change work was pivotal in making this happen. The group was first to write an open letter to Lore Michels and meet with NBC to help the network diversify. So when people spoke out, SNL has to listen. So Color of Change, Ultraviolet got Reebok to drop Rick Ross. So Rick Ross, presently, he was promoting rape in his lyrics of his new single Black in March. So Ultraviolet responded by creating a pressure campaign that encouraged advertisers like Reebok to drop the artist as their brand ambassador. Their petition got thousands of signatures in the matter of hours and read, Reebok devotes a lot of money, a lot of time, energy, and money for marketing to women. And now they are paying a man who is literally bragging about raping women. That tells women that Reebok isn't interested in our business. It tells us that Reebok is okay promoting rape culture. And when 1 out of 5 women is the victim of an unattempted or completed rape that has consequences. So Reebok ended up publicly distancing itself from the rapper and issued a statement announcing they wouldn't be working together anymore. At this time, it is in everyone's best interest for Reebok to end its partnership with Mr. Ross, the statement read. And Rick Ross publicly, he apologized for trivializing sexual assault. And he said, before I am an artist, I'm a father, I'm a son, and I'm a brother to some of my most cherished women in the world, he stressed. So for me to suggest in any way that harm and violation be brought, so he accepted his mistake, and then he finally he has to regret for what he has done. So moving with everyday sexism, it got iTunes to get rid of this really creepy ad. So when Laura Bates, the founder of Everyday Sexism, got a tip about an iTunes app and a game available on Google Play that allowed children as young as 9 to perform plastic surgeries on a fictional female character, she took to social media to share her outrage. Within an hour, she had thousands of responses pouring in from equally fuming Twitter users who couldn't believe this kind of toxic app would exist. So it didn't take long for iTunes and Google Play to delete the program altogether. Although neither company issued a formal response, probably it was an attempt to crush the story. So Google explained that they remove applications from Google Play that violate their policies. And in an interview with ABC News, Bates said, I think it's really affirming to know that there's enough public sentiment and these issues to force big organizations to listen. Now, Goldilocks ad, one of the first feminist ads in Super Bowl history. So after beating more than 15,000 other companies to the punch in the context organized by Intuit, Goldilocks became the first small business to ever advertise during the Super Bowl. Their entry video went viral this summer with a video encouraging girls to become engineers. The spot during the big game was worth about 4 million, mm, 4 million dollars, and got the small company exposure during the most watched sporting event of the year. So we have another example, that is keep can out. So it's always funny to see the politicians run a campaign as if female voters don't represent a majority of voters. News flash, they do. So the latest to ignore this important fact was Ken Casinelli, the Republican candidate to run for governor in Virginia. Standing for notoriously anti-women policies didn't only cost him a couple of votes, it ended up costing him the election. So Planned Parenthood was one of the most uniting forces in the quest to get voters informed about these problematic positions on women. And later on, the other details that you can see. So they have this book, the Keep Can Out website launched in early February, and later on at Keep Can Out Twitter handle to educate voters about Casinelli's record and his latest missteps. So at the end, we see that the women of color, they were able to win. When it comes to married women, Casinelli's opponent won by 42 points. However, when it came to the African American woman, that number doubled to 84 points. Kip Kenow didn't only educate voters about his radical social conservative position, it changed the course of the election. Now, this is a crowd sourcing map. It tracks sexual assaults in Syria. So rape is the least reported crime, but Lauren Wolf, she is the director of Women Under Siege at the Women's Media Center, trying to change that by harnessing the power of technology. Wolf's journalism project aims to document how sexualized violence is used in Syria against women, men, and children by creating a crowd-sourced map tracking every incident of sexual assault. The aim of the project is to plot where the crime happens, but hopes to also serve as evidence in the case of legal actions. Now, GoDaddy Stop Being Worst. It was back in 2011. This was again another project which is called as Representation Project, which started at the Not Buying It hashtag. So GoDaddy was one of their main targets. After receiving thousands of tweets, they had no choice but to respond. And finally, the hashtag reached 2 million more internet users in 2013, and that it did in 2012. So the company responded and changed their advertising strategy. So with the launch of Representation Project, new app, we can only expect more companies to follow in GoDaddy's footsteps. 2014 Super Bowl was decidedly less sexiest with a few exceptions than it has been in the past, and many saying it's thanks to the non-profit online activism. So Rush Limbaugh, she lost a lot of cash after calling Sandra fluke assault. So this is where it's a story after the Media Matters broke the story reporting that Limbaugh has called the student a slut who wanted be paid to have sex. People got organized, like really organized for that. So they had Stop Rush website or Stop Rush hashtag. And finally, we see that the overwhelming majority of advertisers never returned to Limbaugh's program. So in lieu of apologizing, Limbaugh added insult to injury by suggesting that women who believe they should have access to birth control without copay should record their sexual escape. So this is how it doesn't actually know how birth control even works. That was the comments. So Limbaugh did end up apologizing, but feminists did not accept it. So activists got Wendy Davis pro-choice filibuster to matter. Now, when Wendy Davis stood up to Red Perry and his anti-choice GOP pose during a 13-hour filibuster, not a single major news outlet chose to air it. There were 180,000 people from tuning in the live stream after the state senator posted it on social media. So we have Stand With Wendy hashtag, So the most trending topic in the United States then that night, bringing in at times 1,700 tweets per minute. Rachel Scale, co-founder, the Lee, put it perfectly in a piece of Medium. So the bill Wendy Davis was filibustering, the one that would close a third of Texas abortion clinics and make the procedure illegal after 20 weeks. So we find that she's already received a total 95,892 grassroots contributions of $50,000 or less. So organizations like Emily's List have helped Davis sustain that kind of support with numerous petitions and contributions pledges. So you have another example of stop funding Planned Parenthood. So remove all its grants to parenthood out of the blue. The internet lost it. MoveOn.org played a pivotal role in creating a petition that drew more than 8 lakh signatures in support of Planned Parenthood. So according to the petition's website, Coleman's decision to drop Planned Parenthood would mean up to 1,70,000 women could be unable to get the screenings and early detection of breast cancer that save lives. So feminists talked about it, wrote about it, tweeted about it, and stopped financial contributing altogether, amounting to a 22 drop in donations the following year, forcing the Komen Foundation to seize its temper tantrum against Planned Parenthood. Even once the controversy was over, major sponsors dropped the organization and participation in their events plummeted. So again, digital tools that women's health activists used to organize then are still active now. Stand with app hashtag or Amanda Marcotte is still being used to mobilize around Planned Parenthood funding. So we have Planned Parenthood saved me, and the stories till today continues with the accessible healthcare for women today. Disney pulled t-shirts that assumed girls can't be heroes. Now, it took 1,000 not buying it tweets and almost 8,000 signatures on representation projects. Change.org petition. Many a time we get, petitions on the Facebook, and we simply sign. Sometimes we fill the form, and sometimes we take it so very leniently, but it is a great contribution. So change.org petition, it was being signed and 8,000 signatures were received. Disney Store finally withdrew their t-shirts, reinforcing terrible outdated gender stereotypes. So these were gender stereotypes. The Avenger t-shirts that read "I need a hero" were pulled thanks to unflinching feminist activism, all of which took place online. Now, the then president, I know today Donald Trump is the president of America, but it was the then president, Barack Obama, who has addressed the epidemic of sexual assaults and campuses, and it was also due to the feministing this online campaign. So feministing as a whole has been committed to hosting conversations about sexual assault and rape culture. 3 people on staff have been particularly invested in using those discussions to affect social change. You might be aware that President Obama formed a task force to tackle the epidemic of sexual violence on college campuses, but you might not know that 3 members of feministing were key to making this happen. So Alexander Brodsky, an editor at Feministing, filed an administrative complaint against Yale along with 15 other students after school authorities told her to keep quiet after a classmate attempted to rape her. So all the details that you can see, it was a change.org petition demanding the Department of Education take steps to tackle the culture of impunity many rapists enjoy in the universities with lenient policies. Both women, along with feministing contributing writer Susanna Bobadilla, created a campaign called Know Your 9ED Act Now. So finally, it was being seen that the issue was being handled. And remember, when people said blogging was dead, feministing and all the activists on the campaign sure proved them wrong. And rape, we know that it is a very, very dangerous kind of a disease that has been spread. So one needs to stop the sexual and the rape kind of thing that is happening like every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes, a woman is raped in the world. Moving ahead, Harrods pulled sexist children's books, telling boys how to be clever and girls how to be gorgeous. So this was also one of the projects. Good morning. Please be advised that children's book that many of you have tweeted us about have been removed from our shelves. So finally, the decision was being taken, and it was Harrods department store in London for displaying a pretty disturbing children's book display. So in less than 24 hours, popular department store removed the books and apologized for ever having them on display. So most of the conversation online happened thanks to the representation project and their hashtag not buying it. So England's £10 note now features feminist hero that is Jane Austen. It was a tireless activism of Caroline Paris Credo. The UK government revoked its decision to remove a female figure from the £10 note in favor of a male one. After she started her campaign, so she got Jane Austen on the bill. She received a slew of online abuse, mostly through Twitter. She reported receiving 50 abusive tweets in an hour, about 12 hours. And finally, the man was being arrested by the police. So these are the some of the even online, you get so many products that are being sold online. You have online stores and many other products that are being there. So Amazon has to stop selling t-shirts promoting violence against women. These were the t-shirts like keep calm and hit her, keep calm and rape a lot. So again, this project was being taken up by the representation project, which have got off the virtual shelves these t-shirts. So moving ahead, Bare Minerals, they have to stop using sexual harassment to sell the products. Like you have the feminist activists like Sarah Elsid went to support her friend running the Women's Night Marathon in Washington, D.C. last spring, and saw young men being paid to promote a product by holding suggestive signs like "You look beautiful, all sweetie." She was outraged after teaming up with Rainey Davidson, Cass and Holy Grail Stop Street Harassment. So again, it was change.org petition asking community to stop encouraging sexual harassment. That was how they looked at it. And it's ironic because you are exactly the kind of women that we are inspired by, because you are fighting the good fight and standing up for women. So they finally they said that so to know that this is not what was translated on the street really pains us. We take our concerns so seriously, and we really believe this is a learning opportunity for all the brand. So please rest assured that these signs will not be used going forward on the go where to. So we are glad we are having this chance to learn. So if that's not effective feminism campaigning, then what it is. So Facebook was forced to take rape seriously. As I right now mentioned, rape is a very deadliest kind of a disease that is going on. So women, action, and the media. So everyday sexism project, which is again Laura Bates. Facebook was forced to take its women problem seriously after the group of women realized that Facebook wasn't taking gender-based hate speech seriously. They wrote an open letter co-signed by Equality Now, Holaback, FAME 2.0, and many other anti-violence organizations, and started online campaign. They received more than 60,000 tweets and 5,000 emails, and finally the page, the content promoting violence against women was removed. So an ethics committee examined a judge who denied an abortion for 16-year-old on moral grounds. So this was again Nebraska Judge Peter Bechelon gained national attention after he denied a young woman's right to terminate a pregnancy because of his anti-choice beliefs. So finally, this judge, like so many others around the country, chose to put his personal ideology above the rule of law. So this unethical behavior should be send a chill down every American spine. So this was again with the petition, 89,000 signatures were being received, and finally the judge has to accept. Now, the fearless women behind ideal, no more got indigenous issues on the map. So it was again with the there was an act would make significant changes to the Native Protection Act. That was the Native Protection Act with no consultation of indigenous populations. So although the bill was passed in 2012 December, their movement got the media attention when Theresa Spence, a chief of the Etwa Pisket First Nations in northern Ontario, went on a 6-week hunger strike, and the assembly of the First Nations delegation on January 11 as per a request. Then the movement is still the focus of mainstream media that gain considerable traction of so and so forth. And you can see the trending on Twitter and the Facebook, and near about 1,47,000 likes, and support for the group is spreading beyond Canada. So at the request of feminist activists, Twitter brought back the block button. Now, this was related with the Zerlina Maxwell and the feminist Twitterati, who ironically took to Twitter to voice their concern about the company's decision to remove the button altogether. So, like many other women online, Zerlina Maxwell had been the target of aggressive death and rape threats, especially following a heated segment where she called on men to take responsibility of sexual violence. Within few hours of her creating a change.org petition demanding that Twitter bring back the block button, the social networking site reversed its decision, and again it was due to the online activism or online feminism or the digital feminism. So the ACLU is marrying 5K couples in states where same-sex marriage is illegal. We would be listening to the plenary lectures that are being related with the GBLTQ and their issues and challenges that are put in front of them. So you may know that the ACLU won the case to overturn JOMA again in summer 2013. Again, with the online, and check out their contest and vote for their favorite couple. So again, gay marriages or the LGBTQ people and their rights campaign. Again, a campaign, as I told you, no one needs it is regardless boundaries, class, nations when we come to the online feminism. So a UN woman revealed the alarming rate of sexism left in the world. So it is Google's autocomplete campaign will go down as one of the most effective representations of gender inequality. I'm repeating, it is gender inequality in the digital world. Even though the online world has been used by many feminists to effect change, it is still a hostile place for women. The illustrations created by UN Women made that very clear. Christopher Hunt, the art director of the project, says he was shocked by how much hatred there still is in the world. When we came across these searches, we were shocked by how negative they were and decided we had to do something with them. You can check out the full collection and the images that were being given there at that particular site. So this list of successful feminist campaign is by no means exhaustive. What did I miss? Let me know on Twitter and Facebook. Though they are there, I have now used these two movies as one of the examples. These are even how women have been empowered by these movies. Okay, so there are two movies that I'm going to be just for two minutes. I would be displaying them. I mean to say they are going to be played. Yeah. There are three characters. One is a small girl. It's a first story of Hawa. Then you have Hura, and there is a little girl. So three generations. The girl, the middle-aged woman, and the last one is the old woman. Okay? This is by Iraqi Marzia Markizi, the director, and it had displayed. Yeah. This is another one. This is I Am a Woman. It's a biopic of Helen Reddy, 2020 release.
If you want to make it as a singer, America is where you need to be.
A song. And there are various other songs that have been
paid less than the band.
Yeah.
So they're men, they got families to feed.
Well, I've got a family to feed. My mother tells me I have to choose between career and marriage. I tell her we can have both. From now on, no one will tell us what we can and can't do.
This way, you sing very nicely. But male group's all the rage right now. You've heard of the Beatles, right?
Did it ever occur to you, men, to ask women what they want to listen to?
Ellen, she's tapped into something here. Remember that march in New York and how many women showed up to that? Bunch of record sales marching down the street.
I am woman, very more, in numbers too big to ignore.
Kind of angry. It's man hating. Jeff, you okay with this?
What are you doing? Want to lose your recording contract?
This is more than just a song to me.
But it's wisdom. Yes, I
Twitter is.
Helen ready.
And I would like to thank God because she makes everything possible.
Yes. So, उनको दिखाओ. Yes. So, hope I have been sticking up to my time and I have made the presentation. Keynote address, I have tried to focus upon various issues, even in the movies, in films, and basically we do have a text like Wits and Feminism by Jatiya, Jane, where she talks about the most of the women who have been empowered and how the tension has happened. So I think I have tried to do justice by trying to formulate resistance, I mean to say the feminist, digital feminist discourses in these, by giving the example of these 23 digital campaigns that have been online, either with Facebook or by the Twitter. So I thank Dr. Roshan Move, the convener of this 3-day international conference, for giving me this opportunity to present my views and ideas at this digital platform. Thank you so much, and thank you each and everyone for giving me a patient listening. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful session. Now, I would like to take up some questions from our participants. So, first question is by Dr. Sneha Gobi Krishna, that why there is a need to segregate feminism as online feminism when digitalization has become a part of everyday life. This is her question, ma'am.
Why is there a need to segregate feminism as online feminism and digitalization becomes a part of it? Yeah. Definitely, why we need to do that, because many of them, as I mentioned Rachel Baldwin, I mentioned the other writers who mentioned that feminism is dead and it is no more alive as a discipline. So definitely we need to address the issues of women, and I think as long as the world is going to exist, the problems and the challenges and the existence of the majority minority is going to be there. So we have to have the digitalization. I mean to say, if not on digital platform, where the women are going to complain about their problems, about their issues, how they are going to raise their voice. And that's why I mentioned that even in the global pandemic period, the world was stopped, but violence against domestic violence against the women was not stopped, and it was 10 years more. What was recorded has been increased to a great extent. So where they are going to put forth their voice. So it is through digital online platform, so that their issues, their problems will be solved.
Thank you, ma'am. And moving towards the second question by Nidha Shaheen, that what about the rural or illiterate women who even don't know their rights? And what about that?
Yeah, definitely. Because see, when we talk about women, when we talk about women empowerment, when we talk about women's issues, we need to keep it in mind. We cannot have the same parameters applied for all the types of women. I am basically specifically using this term type. Type means I am putting up into three classes. Like you have the privileged class, the higher start of the society, women belonging to that particular class, women belonging to the middle class, and the women belonging to the workers class. So we cannot have the same parameters to apply and to evaluate them. But definitely we need to do something now. Even I do remember the incident that took place, and it was at the railway station, as I mentioned. The woman was not educated, that for that matter. I mean to say, everyone knows how to use the mobile now. Yeah, so she was on online, and she just have sent a written complaint, and the work was being done. Now the problem with the online feminism is, when we talk about these women, so Mahatma Gandhi ji has once mentioned, if you want to develop the nation, you need to develop the villages first. So when he talked about the villages, I think we need to develop these underprivileged sections of societies, the minorities, the underprivileged minorities, the what you can say, the I'm not using backward as such a word for them, but not so developed sections of societies. So we need to, who is going to do for them? So we need to liberate them, we need to educate them. So somewhere or the other, it is a prime duty of each and every one of us that we need to educate them. That is how we can take up it right now.
Thank you,
Yeah.
ma'am, for your answer. And I think one more interesting last question I can see in the chat box by Dr. Neha Arora. She wants she wants to know that you just talked about, gave examples from mostly from the West about digital feminism. She wants to know if there is any example in from perspective of Indian feminists.
Yeah, definitely. When we have been talking about Indian feminism, there are various movements that have been coming up. Now, the problem was when we took up as a project, because I deliberately mentioned about it, that was at a national level, that the project was being a sponsored research project that was being given to us. And there we tried to formulate Indian digital feminism. So that was a term, or the concept that I tried to coin over there, in form of IDF, and we do had the www.idf.org as a website. We could run it for 2 years because of the time limit that was being given to us, and we tried to do our level best. What I was trying to do at that time was, ma'am, we moved on to different institutions, more than 22 different institutions. We collaborated with them. We had been on the field survey. So we went into look into the matters of the people, what were their issues, what were their problems. So we need to we have even seen that still on today, the kind of discrimination that has been done, because you are a male or you are a female, and based on that, the kind of discrimination that exists, I have seen in a class, because we had also adopted some schools. So I have seen girls literally crying in front of us when they were being talking about the kind of discrimination they are facing today. So this is something where in the Indian context, we do need to formulate digital feminist discourses. That's a rather a greater step in that. But when we talk about feminist discourses as such, we have seen that whether it is Urdu literature or whether it was Sanskrit literature, it was not done even in that. So we tried to formulate on the basis of, we need to formulate the praxis and pedagogies for that, the methods and the other related issues with it. So I think I tried to answer this particular question. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Our last participant is having some question. Yes, Abhimanyu sir, you can ask.
Yeah.
Hello, Dr. Mehrunnisa Pathan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Yes.
So it is so good to see you again. I think we are getting associated for the third or the fourth time together on the intellectual platform. And it is always a treat to hear from you. And today especially it has been the intellectual breakfast for us, listening to you.
Thank you, sir.
I have two questions, madam. It was so interesting that I was writing down everything and taking notes in your session. So, when you talk about digital feminism, lots of questions have been asked. My question is, how do you collect data on digital feminism? Collection of data on digital feminism, is there any feminist online platform? This is my first question. And my second question is, I would like you to elaborate a little more on Islamic feminism because that is the term which came across in your session, and I'm hearing it for the first time.
Okay.
These are the two questions. Kindly address them. Thank you.
Abhimanyu sir, what do you want related to Islamic feminism? Can you repeat that question, please?
Yeah. My question about Islamic feminism is, when did it get evolved? Because it is not the term which has been used in literature before or in any.
Yeah, definitely.
So it is for the first time I'm coming across. So if you can throw
Okay,
some light on it, it will really help me to understand, and maybe I can use it in my research also.
yeah, definitely. I will be answering the second question first and the first question afterwards. Okay. So moving on to the
Sure.
first question, Islamic feminism. Yeah. We talk about Islamic feminism. Sir, there are various books that have that have been come up in the name of Islam and feminism. Okay, that's one book. There is another book which is related with theorizing Islamic feminism. Actually, I have written a research article, Theorizing Islamic Feminism, a study of Muslim women writers in English. And during that particular research article, I have gone through various books that are being written on Islam and feminism, because most of the time when we talk about Muslim women, we only discuss about the scarf, or we talk about the burqa system, or we talk about the veil. We never talk about the other issues that have been there. What I mean to say is that if you bring out the woman out of burqa, are you going to solve the other issues that have been related with her? What about the empowerment? What about the job opportunities? What about the social, economical, at various levels, the empowerment that is being needed, that is being, sidetracked, and only you are focusing upon the veil or the hijab. If I'm sitting in a veil right now and addressing various issues, it is never going to change my mindset. Okay, it is my knowledge. My empowerment is mine. Okay, whether I wear a burqa or not, that should not be the major issue of our discussion, and that has been basically highlighted. Okay,
Yes.
again and again in the mainstream discussions, they never go with that. Okay, and these Islamic feminism, as I mentioned, rightly mentioned, and I began my presentation with the first ayat, that is the reading the name of thy Lord. Reading the name of thy Lord. I am translating it from Holy Quran, where it says, read is educate yourself. Read is reading. Yes, it is Bismi Rabbikal Lazi, which means read in the name of thy Lord who created all the human beings. I'm saying all the human beings. No class, no race, nothing like that. Okay? No gender bias, no discrimination of any kind. Who created all the human beings from one single soul, men and women. Okay? So it's that kind of equality, that kind of representation that has been projected in Islamic feminism. Okay, that's really interesting. If you log on to, if you want Abhimanyu sir, I can provide you the list of the books that I have on Islam and feminism. Okay, that's one part of my
This is a very interesting explanation, madam, you have given. I have never thought from this perspective also.
yeah.
Thank you.
What was the second question that you wanted to speak? You wanted to ask me
Online
about?
platform.
Yeah, how you are going to collect the data. Yes, so, sir, there are various, hashtag. When I had gone through the details, it was Yasmin Hassan, who was the global director of equality now. So they are trying to, there are different organizations. If you log on to online digital feminism, and you can be a member to them, they in your collaboration, they organize activities like international conferences, workshops, and so on and so forth. So Me Too movement is one of the part and parcel to
Yeah.
that, what's happening in India now. I don't wanted to get into the details, like, sometimes it is for defaming and others. I have that controversial part of that. So this is how, yeah.
Thank you, madam.
Yeah, the digital feminism has been coming.
See, from the discussion, another question has also come up. Pinaki, thanks to you. Thank you. Now it's over to you,
I
Pinaki.
hope sir you have got your answers.
Yes. Thank you, Mehrunnisa, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay. Any question from any participant? I guess no. So it was indeed a pleasure, ma'am, to have you in this session. Thank you so much for such an introspective session. Thank you once again.